Welcome to Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a
What's
light
your
on
story?
incredible impact. What does accessibility mean to you?
What's your mission?
Hello and welcome to another episode of accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions. My name is Sapir and I head up the nonprofit partnership team here at accessiBe. I'm really excited for this episode of the Spotlight Sessions where we highlight disability advocates and changemakers and the organizations and individuals and the work that they do. Today's guest is Sarah Jones, so welcome Sarah.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you, and we're so excited to have you. So let's jump right in. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Sarah. I am from the UK, from a city called Manchester. Currently, I'm the Senior Development Manager at accessiBe's, a UK-based charity that works to make sport inclusive. My background, I guess, I've kind of always worked in a combination of sport and in the disability sector in the UK. So I started out as a climbing coach about 10 years ago. I'm still a climbing coach now. But I've also kind of worked through the charity sector. I worked in adult social care for a while, and I went into teaching in a specialist college. So lots of different kind of facets of experience, but I've always been very close to working in inclusion and accessibility in a combination with sport. Personally, I guess my upbringing has a lot to kind of play in terms of where my career's gone. So I grew up as a young carer. I have two parents with significant disabilities. My mum has cerebral palsy and a learning difficulty, and my dad is blind. And I also had a younger brother who had complex needs as well. Unfortunately passed away last year. So always been very close to kind of issues that have, I guess, arose from not having access to things. Very aware of the difference in quality of life, I guess, that somebody can experience if what they access isn't accessible for their needs. So I feel like I'm very passionate on the subject. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much for sharing, and what an incredible background and story, and I'm excited to highlight some of the work that you're doing today. So can you tell us a little bit about how you found yourself at Access Sport?
Yeah, so I've only been there about 3 months now, so very new to the organisation, although I've known about the organisation for a while. It truly is kind of the most incredible charity because I work with a team of people that are so determined to find a way. That's kind of the only way I can describe it, really. We always manage to find a way to involve anybody and everybody in any sport. And we work with lots of sports across the UK. So we work both with kind of national governing bodies of sports, and we work in specific places in the UK. And essentially, we just try to make any sport and every sport inclusive for people with disabilities. Generally, we work with young people up to the age of 25. But essentially, we work with coaches, we upskill coaches, we train coaches to then say, look, whoever comes through that door, whether they come in a wheelchair, with a cane, whether they have somebody supporting them, whether they can't communicate in a traditional way, you can involve them in that sport. It will just look very different. So I'd known about the organisation for a while. Prior to that, I worked for a little football club called Manchester United. So I worked for their foundation. So we did lots of adaptive sport in schools. And this organisation was one of the organisations that we were working with, really. So I kind of knew them already. And when this opportunity came up, it was perfect, really. It's exactly where I wanted to go. And I feel like I've got a much greater reach now working with lots of different sports. And I'm learning very quickly that, there's lots of different ways to change sport and make it accessible. But the team that I work with are just incredible.
Yeah, definitely. And with the different experiences that you've had, when you hear the word accessibility as it relates to sport or otherwise, what comes to mind for you?
I think for me, I've always defined it as it can really determine somebody's quality of life. So generally, if you have a disability, and particularly those people with disabilities that rely on additional care, whether it be from social care or healthcare or anything that has to help them get through the day, having things that aren't accessible can mean that you can't access very, very basic things that everybody is entitled to. So particularly when you have a complex need, I think your world can be really, really small. And I speak from experience in that, my parents and my brother, there were so many places that they just couldn't go for whatever reason, whether they couldn't communicate with the people that worked there, they couldn't get through the door, they couldn't get transport there, they couldn't access the website to be able to see what services they provide. And that meant that what they had available to them in the day, what they have available to them now, it's a very, very short list. And naturally, without those additional experiences, without being able to go out and meet new people and try new things and, move your body in a way that's meaningful, naturally your health, your mental well-being will start to decline. So it's the most important thing, I think, particularly when we're working with people with disabilities, is it accessible at every single point of that journey. So, when we work with sports clubs, we say, look, we'll look at the session, we'll look at the sport, we'll look at whatever you're going to be doing in that hour, that half an hour with those young people. Great, we can make that accessible, we can use adaptive equipment, we can train you up, but actually you do have to think of all the points before that. So the whole journey from even finding out about what's going on in your community, finding out about what's around the corner, that has to be accessible information as well. And if that community can't find that information and can't either read it or hear it or see it or understand it, then they're not going to get to the session or to the experience. So yeah, it's massively important, I think.
To be included.
Yeah,
definitely. So that being said, what's one thing that you wish, maybe not even one, what are some things that you wish people knew about people with disabilities?
I guess for me, I would say that the disability almost isn't the important bit. I think often when we meet people with disabilities, or you hear about them or you see them represented, the first thing you see, depending on the disability, is the disability. And naturally, I think if you're somebody that maybe hasn't worked with people with disabilities in the past, you can kind of start spiraling, thinking, oh, how am I going to do this? How are they going to do this? How are they going to access what I can do? What do I need to change? I think just sometimes going, it's just a person, and they may look different, they may communicate differently, they may move differently, but ultimately they kind of want to do the same things, they deserve to be able to do the same things. And actually, with the right environment and the right support, they can do everything that I can do, that you can do. There's not really any limit, I guess. The barriers that they face are barriers that we put in place. So it's kind of up to us to remove those barriers and find ways of making our world more inclusive and more accessible, I guess. So I think that's the biggest thing for me. It's that you just try not to see the disability first. It's a person. It's a person with thoughts and feelings and wants and wishes, and all of the things that they may find difficult aren't important. That the person is at the heart of that, and they're the people that we should be focusing on, rather than how can I yeah.
That's such a great answer. Do you have a message for businesses and brands with regard to accessibility and inclusion?
I feel like it's just really important that whenever we're having these conversations about accessibility and inclusion, that the people that it's for are included in those conversations. So it's one step in the right direction for a business or a company or a charity to start thinking about becoming inclusive, or start thinking about becoming diverse or accessible. But if you're not involving those people that the job is for in the process, then you're not going to get it right. Whenever we do a lot of training with coaches, and we consult the people that the training is about. So we've just done some consulting with on neurodiversity training. So we've gone out to people who, people with autism, people with ADHD, to ask them, look, is this content correct? Is it representative of your experience? Is there anything that we can add or we can take away? And I think for businesses that are starting to, quite rightly so, delve into becoming more accessible, having somebody involved in those conversations is key, or it just won't hit the mark.
Absolutely. 100% agree with you there. So Given your diverse background and the type of work that you've done, can you share a memorable experience or something that's had a lasting impact on you from your work in adaptive or inclusive sport?
I'd probably say it's the thing that sticks in my mind is probably when, so going back to my brother, he was a young man with autism and epilepsy and a learning difficulty. Really struggled with communication, and I think because of that he then struggled often with challenging behaviour, so it was very hard to engage him in things that he would find enjoyable, particularly things that were physical. So he'd have lots of interest in things like books and trains and watching things on telly, but getting him to do something that was movement based was quite difficult consistently anyway. So I think he was about 11. I'd just started as a climbing instructor. I worked at an outdoor centre in the UK. So I was teaching climbing outside, very cold all the time, but it was great. And he came to visit. So he came on a weekend, and he just to kind of try some of the things. And knowing him, I was very apprehensive. I knew that it was going to be a struggle for him to be in a new environment, an environment that's not accessible. It's outside. The paths, he's in a wheelchair, and the paths are rocky and they're bumpy. So it was already going to be a big thing for him to deal with, and he was already quite anxious. Getting him on a climbing wall and getting him on a zip wire and doing all of these, like, to me, really, really fun things, like hanging about in a harness like a monkey, like getting him doing that, he absolutely loved it. And it was something that I'd never even considered he might enjoy. He was coming to visit me and coming to see kind of, where I live, and he stayed with me for the weekend, and it was lovely. But he then, he went climbing and he enjoyed it, and he told me more, and he just wanted to keep going, and getting him off the climbing wall was a very big challenge. The thing that lasted for me from that is not just the fact that he enjoyed it, but then when it came to taking him to places at home, and he had to travel to me and he had to stay with me for the weekend, but any local places that were around where he lived, he couldn't access because they weren't accessible. They weren't, they were climbing centres historically, they're noisy, they're cramped, they're busy. Like, there wasn't anyone that could really understand what he needed at that time. This was a long time ago, so there weren't many SEN disability groups, sport meetup groups or anything like that, where he would feel cared for and where he would be able to access that sport. And I think that's what highlighted, I guess, that particularly in the UK, we have these really small pockets of amazing places that are making everything inclusive, particularly in the outdoor industry. We've got a lot of charity based, like, residential centres that truly, there are no limits to what people can do there. They do inclusive caving, they do inclusive abseil, they do everything. There's no limits, but they're just small pockets, and trying to the difficulty is trying to spread that work out commercially across the whole of the UK. And that's why I love kind of working with Access Sport, is they do that. They take these little pockets of work that they've identified, and they grow that and replicate it, and then essentially help everybody do the same thing. Yeah. And for me, that the reason why that is so important is because that experience for Zach, who was 11, he was a child, he accessed something that was inclusive. He then couldn't access anything from that point. He couldn't continue that experience. At 18, when Zach became an adult, I don't know how it works kind of over there, but in the UK, once you turn 18, or the age can sometimes change depending on where you are, you become an adult, or you become a vulnerable adult, and then the support that you get from the social system massively reduces because you're no longer a child. Yeah. Now, Zach turned 18 shortly after COVID, so there was a lot of time where he wasn't getting the support that he needed at home, and he wasn't going to those places where inclusive sport was happening. He wasn't seeing people that were able to support him day to day. He had school and he had home, and then when schools closed, it was home. And at home, unfortunately, the social system that was supposed to be supporting him weren't giving him enough care. The outcome for Zach, obviously, shortly after he turned 18, he passed away. So, and there's a lot of complexities to that I won't go into right now, but a massive part of that is that his world and what he had to experience and his quality of life was so low and so small, with something like inclusive sport was something that he could do for not just as an adult, as a child, but when he turned 18, he could continue to do that. If there's a sports club that provides something for disabled people to go and access every week, that's another thing that he has to just make his world bigger. So I feel like that point, that little memory that I have, really kind of set the track, I guess, for where I'm going and the work that I want to do, because it's such a kind of it's what's happening. It is, young people are not getting the experiences that they deserve because the places that provide those experiences, it's not that they don't want to. I truly don't think it's that. It's a little bit of fear and a little bit of apprehension, and maybe we don't really know how to do it, so we're not going to do it because we don't want to get it wrong. And hopefully, organisations like mine, like Access Sport, we kind of empower those places to go, no, you can do it. With a little bit of support, you can do it. And these people can come through and they can have wonderful experiences that can be like life lasting, really. And that changes someone's quality of life. That changes somebody's course if they have experiences like that.
Thank you for sharing that story, and also for all of the meaningful work that you do. An organization like Access Sport is so lucky to have you. And I think for all of our listeners also, can you share what's one thing that each person can do to make the world more inclusive?
I think the biggest thing is just to be a little bit kinder. Whenever I've had this question asked me before, and I think if everyone's just a little bit kinder and a little bit more, take a minute to kind of go, okay, what does this person need from me right now? I think often I've worked with lots of young people that have quite complex needs, and I've been that person that's, I've been stood with somebody with complex needs, and there's people staring and there's people saying things, and and it's just like, come on, just take a minute, take a breath, be a bit compassionate, be a bit kinder, and I do think that would go a long way. There's nothing to fear when working with people with disabilities. There's nothing to be scared of, or ask questions, be curious, ask, what is the best way that I can communicate with this person? What do they need? Are they feeling anxious? Can I help? Can I do this? Can I do that? I think just really being kind in everything that we do, I think would be a really nice step towards being more inclusive. It would help us think a little bit better, I think.
I really appreciate that message, and I agree. So let's all be a little bit kinder and more patient and compassionate. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us today on accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks.
Of course. And to all of our listeners, thank you for sticking through the episode. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, and also you can follow us on Instagram at accessiBe_community. We look forward to keeping the conversation going there. Bye-bye.